I'm delighted to be joined once again by the always insightful Gad Saad. He is professor of marketing, evolutionary behavioral scientist, and an author in his own right. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/Gad Saad. That's 2 A's in Saad, and twitter.com/Gad Saad. Gad, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Now, obviously, this week has been huge in terms of terrorist attacks. Today, 26 Christians slaughtered in Egypt. I was talking about it just before the break. Mainstream media's basically buried it. They're not really interested in that. We have Christians being slaughtered across the Middle East, being persecuted, driven out. Of course, we had the Manchester bombing, and in the aftermath of that, we heard the same narrative. And it's this, we must unite against hatred. Gad, I think, when they say we must unite against hatred, and that's the only response they have, and then a week later, everybody forgets about it, and we move on, nothing happens, more people die. Do you think when they say unite against hatred, they're not talking about uniting against the hatred implicit within Islamism? They're talking about uniting against basically us, conservatives, or anyone who speaks out about Islam. I mean, that's the sense I get when they use that kind of rhetoric. Do you agree?
Indeed. I mean, I think you covered it on your own channel. The Professor Dr. Katy Perry came out with a very brilliant strategy for, we just need to unite, we need to hug it out, we need to band together, no more borders, no more walls, and the problems will be resolved. If only I knew that when my family were escaping persecution in Lebanon, we could have hugged it out and we could have remained in Beirut.
Do you think for a second they consider the fact that people who are willing to, behead children, burn people alive in cages, that they're not really influenced by the word love and the word unite, no matter how many times you say it, no matter how many candles you light, no matter how many hashtags you tweet out, no matter how many Facebook profile pictures you change? The barbarians of ISIS, I don't think that really affects them. Do you?
No, I don't. I call this, by the way, ostrich parasitic syndrome, which is a type of mental virus that causes people to reject data, to reject evidence, to reject logic, reason, and then simply utter out endless, useless, suicidal platitudes. It's grotesque, and frankly, I respect the extremist Islamists more than I do the Westerners that grant them coverage.
I still struggle to grasp it. Do you think somewhere in the back of their minds, these people who after every single terror attack say, let's worry about Islamophobia, right? That should be the main concern, is people saying mean things to Muslims on public transport. That should be the main concern after an Islamist has just slaughtered 22, 23 people, mainly young girls. Do you think the kind of people who say that know in the back of their mind, they must know surely, or is the Stockholm syndrome so deep? Do they surely not know that capitulating, showing weakness to a bully, only encourages a bully? Surely they must know that at some level.
I think there's both types. There are some who, in the deep recesses of the privacy of their minds, know that they are just saying empty platitudes, that they don't believe themselves. But I think there are other folks who've been so parasitized by these progressive platitudes that they genuinely believe that ultimately, if these things are happening, we probably did something to deserve this. And so they self-flagellate in their white Western guilt, and they truly believe that they are to blame. It's a cancer, and we need to eradicate it.
And again, when we talk about political correctness, people just think, oh, I mean, you've heard it before. Oh, that's just being mean to people. Being politically correct is just being nice to people. Well, when you have, Gad, 1,400 girls trafficked in Rotherham for sexual abuse by Pakistani rape gangs, and the local council, the local government does nothing about it, specifically because of political correctness, because they don't want to be called racist, then that's when political correctness becomes harmful. And we saw it again prior to this Manchester bombing, Gad. The guy was hanging an ISIS flag from his house, and his neighbors just thought that was perfectly normal. He was out in the street loudly chanting Islamic prayer. He'd been radicalized. His dad was a terrorist, and he was given refugee status in the country. But again, the neighbors saw these signs. We saw it, the same situation in San Bernardino. They were moving into the apartment, receiving suspicious packages. Neighbors said it was suspicious, but they said, we didn't want to report it because we might be seen as bigoted or racist. And we saw that again prior to the Manchester bombing. So Gad, I mean, political correctness is no longer just about being nice to people. It actually represents a harmful threat in these kind of situations, right?
I've actually analogized political correctness to the spider's wasp. So the spider wasp stings a much larger spider, rendering it zombified. It then drags it into its burrow, lays eggs on it, and then the offspring feed on it in vivo. Right. And that's exactly what political correctness is. It's the spider wasp's sting that zombifies our ability to think rationally and critically. And we are slowly led to the abyss of infinite darkness quietly and without any fight in us. It's horrifying. By the way, I just to speak about the point regarding the endless obfuscation that Westerners come up with. I've actually listed the number of excuses that people have offered as quote root causes. And frankly, if you read that list, you would think it's satire that I'm coming up with. Beard bullying caused this. Toxic masculinity caused this. Lack of art exposure. They weren't exposed to enough high art. Uh, Solar panels, carbon emissions. I mean, it's just endless, right? And when you look at this, you say, is it possible that a functioning human being can actually utter such stupidity in all seriousness? And I guess I regret to say that the answer is yes.
No, they will come up with any excuse. I mean, we've always made the point, don't interfere, don't overthrow secular governments in Syria and Libya. And that's the only point which has some validity. When they talk about socioeconomic status of terrorists, if you actually look at many of them across the world, many of them are doctors, they're PhDs. These people aren't vagrants, they're not bums. In many cases, they're well educated and quite wealthy. For the countries in which they live. So again, that's been completely dismantled. The other aspect, Gad, is I think that they use this whole Islamophobia thing as a kind of human shield because, of course, the leftist argument on open borders and mass immigration is completely bankrupt. They can't defend it anymore at this point. It's clearly wrong. It's clearly harmful. So they use the Muslims, the brown people, whoever, as kind of rhetorical human shields for their argument. So then when you attack open border immigration policies, they can just claim you're attacking Muslims. So, of course, that means they don't have to defend their argument if they're holding up the poor oppressed Muslim as the human shield. So it's kind of a way of deflecting the fact that they have no argument.
Yeah, I hear you. I've actually compared it to, I don't know if you know the myth of the noble savage, the Jean-Jacques Rousseau argument, where, the argument is that in the natural state, people are noble, and then came along the Western man, the white man, that caused all this rife around the world. Well, in a sense, what the current Westerners are doing is reviving this myth of the noble savage, right? The brown people, the brown Muslim people, the others are noble, are kind, are peaceful. It is ultimately us who are to blame. Again, it's grotesque. It's a mind virus, and we have to win this battle of ideas. Otherwise, we will lose when we take a long-term view. We will lose.
No, I was thinking earlier about a term to describe this attitude which you just described, and it is the noble savage. It's like they had some justification to massacre, to maim hundreds of people in Manchester, when in reality, this bomber was just a thug and a loser. He was a gang member. The guy who he grew up with, who was his best friend, was a gang rapist. So this idea that they're somehow noble in this greater cause for Allah, complete BS. A lot of them are complete losers and thugs. It's like, I agree with Trump when he calls them losers, because that then takes away the left's opportunity to make the argument that it's all about Western foreign policy or that they have some kind of legitimate grievance. No, they're losers. But to that, I mean, there's a headline out of The Independent today. Martin Hett's parents say they only feel sorry for Manchester suicide bomber. So you've got parents of children who died in that attack saying that they feel sorry. They don't feel anger. They don't want anything done about it, presumably. They feel sorry for the guy who killed their child. I mean, what level of Stockholm syndrome do you have to be under to come out with statements like that?
Well, this reminds me, although I think your example is even more grotesque because it deals with children who have died. It reminds me of the case of the Norwegian, I think, journalist who had been sodomized by, I think, a Somali migrant. And then when the Somali migrant was going to be imprisoned and then deported to Somalia, the guy felt guilty, right? So the guy who had been raped and sodomized could not muster enough anger against his rapist. Instead, he felt bad that this poor guy was going to be mistreated in Somalia. It's unbelievable. You can't make that stuff up.
No, there was another story, I think it was out of Germany, where a woman got raped by a migrant in a train carriage on an overnight train, and she said she didn't report it to police because she thought that might be racist. You know, they've had a hard time in Iraq or Syria or wherever, so you have to be tolerant, you have to be understanding. And we see the same thing with verbal and sexual assault on the streets. Many women think that tolerance is accepting being sexually molested by these migrants. Absolutely insane. Want to move on though, Gad? You talked about you tweeted about the hijab quite a few times. I was on your Twitter account earlier. Hustler magazine is now glamorizing the hijab. You know, we have actual feminists in Iran and other countries being thrown in prison for removing their hijabs. The early Arab Muslim feminist group, the earliest Arab Muslim feminist group, the Egyptian Feminist Union, this is 100 years ago. They removed their veils in protest. So the very first actual Arab Muslim feminist groups decried the veil. How in the hell did they turn the hijab? I'm talking about leftists and cultural institutions in general. How in the hell did they turn the hijab into a symbol of women's rights?
So I think it comes from the Western feminist idea that the male gaze is a form of visual rape, right? So if you stare at a woman and you sexually objectify her, you sexually desire her, you are effectively visually raping her. And so any accoutrement, any sartorial decision that you take that reduces the male gaze ultimately is a good thing. So the burqa, which by definition can't have any male gaze, I can't see anything other than a black tent, is liberating, whereas the bikini is patriarchal oppression. Again, it's part of the same confluence of mind viruses that have completely parasitized the Western mind. It's unbelievable.
But again, you know, logically, it's the ultimate capitulation to a patriarchal system, a damaging, harmful one, which is Islam, which is being imported into the West. And it's the whole point, isn't it, about, you know, for years we had feminists and people on the left whining about rape culture based on completely fraudulent statistics about 1 in 5 women being raped on college campuses. That argument was eviscerated. Then along came hundreds of thousands of migrants who imported an actual rape culture into Europe, and they're absolutely silent on it. In fact, Gad, I think it was after the Cologne incident, you know, the mass molestation, the feminists, the local feminists, went out to the migrant camp and gave out roses to the migrants after some of them had been involved in this mass molestation, which again, you know, it's the ostrich effect you talked about. They would rather be raped or even die than be called a racist. I mean, people just can't grasp that kind of mindset, but that's what's happening, right?
Yeah, I think in Sweden, wasn't it the Swedish police who came up with this Einstein decision of having a bracelet on women that says, no, this is my body, you can't touch me. And they were very surprised when apparently the migrant men were not moved by this powerful feminist symbol, and they still attacked the women. Surprising, isn't it?
Well, in Finland, they had we played the video. They had a woman using the force, and she was holding her arms out to a potential rapist, and you know, just encouraging him not to rape her by using some kind of invisible force field. Yeah, I don't think that'd work that great in the migrant suburbs of Rinkeby or Stockholm or anywhere like that. But you did post something which was fairly positive, I think, on your Facebook page, where you talked about how the, quote, battle of ideas will be won. Can we rely on Muslims within the Muslim community to reform Islam, given that those who have tried, who have become ex-Muslims, you know, are met with death threats, censorship, and violence? Where is this reform going to come from?
I've spoken quite openly about my pessimism regarding any reform initiative. I think ultimately what's going to have to happen is that the West is going to have to realize that there are inherent elements of Islam, not all of it. There are some spiritual parts that are perfectly livable with, if I can put it that way. But there are other parts that are simply, there is no way to slice them and dice them in any way and reinterpret them or reanalyze them so that they become palatable to our Western values. And in that case, those particular passages, I suspect down the line, some legal scholars will deem them to be seditious to our Western values and somehow find a way to consider them incitement to hate and ban them. I really don't see, look, we're going to solve this problem either peacefully or violently. I still hold out hope that we will do so peacefully, but there's no way to do so peacefully while rearranging the decks on the Titanic while the Titanic is sinking. Well, reform is ultimately a losing battle. We have to recognize that there are elements of Islam that cannot be reformed, and then the next step is to decide what to do with that. What can we do about that?
And of course, one thing is to admit that there isn't a Quran version 2.0. The radicals, as they call them, are reading the exact same damn book as everybody else, as the moderate Muslims, as the nominal Muslims. But we have this idea that they're somehow inspired by something completely different, Gad, when they're reading the exact same book. And people say, oh, Islam, the Quran is about peace. I mean, if you kill one person, you kill the world. Well, yeah, but then somewhere else it says kill all the infidels. That's the same book being read by ISIS. There's not a Quran version 2.0.
And not only that, the passage that says all the peace stuff has, from a doctrinal perspective, has actually been abrogated, has been nullified. So if there's a passage that says be peaceful, and then another one that says don't be peaceful, if the later one comes, then it supersedes the earlier one. So it's not as though there's a contradiction. From a doctrinal perspective, all of that peaceful Meccan stuff has been abrogated. And so you're exactly right. There is no set of codes that we could go to called radical Islam or Islamism or jihadism or militant extremism. It's all contained in the same set of sources. It's the Quran, it's the Hadith, and it's the Sirah, the biography of Muhammad. That's it.
And it's the same thing with Ramadan. The later teaching overruled the previous teaching. So the original teaching said that Muslims had to be peaceful during Ramadan. They couldn't attack anybody. It was later superseded by a teaching which said the exact opposite, that is the perfect time to be deceptive and to launch attacks. And lo and behold, today we have ISIS ordering people to launch more attacks during Ramadan. We'll be back with Gad Saad on the Alex Jones Show Live. Stay tuned. We're back live on the Alex Jones Show. Going to go back to Gad Saad here in a minute. First, I want to direct you again to InfoWarsStore.com for the Memorial Day mega special. As I said, we're under assault, constant assault, financial attack. You see what they're trying to do with Hannity, targeting his advertisers. We've been targeted as well, especially with the YouTube demonetization, which has been going on for months, where they've basically wiped out 80% of our income on that platform. So we rely on your support more than ever, and you've done everything, and it's been an amazing effort to see us through this difficult time. So please continue to do so by getting the products at InfoWarsStore.com. We have the Memorial Day mega special, huge mammoth discounts on everything from Silver Bullet, colloidal silver, to Brain Force, to Knockout, 50% off Knockout, 65% off Silver Bullet. That is a huge discount. We also have the Conservatism is the New Counterculture t-shirts and mug. This triggers the libtards like nothing else. We've monetized liberal tears, proving very popular indeed. High quality, big fat chunky mug, high quality stenciling there. The t-shirt is also made in the USA. It is high quality. All those products available right now at InfoWarsStore.com. Gad Saad, before we get into the Bill C-16, which I think we'll dip into that after the next break, G7 happening in Sicily. They've got the boats coming in from Libya. I talked about this earlier, where the NGO ships go to 12 miles off the coast of Libya. Basically, it's a taxi service. They bring these migrants who, most of them aren't from Libya. They're definitely not from Syria. There's no black people in Syria. You don't get black Syrians. But of course, nobody asked that question. It's still framed as the Syrian refugee crisis. You've got 200,000 Africans arriving in Italy every single year. Half of them just go missing. But Gad, they've suspended the G7, the migrant boats arriving in Sicily for the duration of the G7 conference. Well, I mean, what does it say about the political class that they don't want to be faced with the reality of their own policies while they inflict them on everyone else?
Apparently, they can't handle the cultural enrichment that might come their way. Others should be culturally enriched. They're already sufficiently haughty and culturally enriched. So I can't think of any other reason other than that, right?
I mean, it's absolutely incredible that I mean, Merkel, they're all bowing down to her. Did you see Macron, and we played the video earlier, we can roll it again. Macron walks up to Trump. Obviously, you know, it's Trump's first appearance at one of these kind of international conferences. He's at the front of the queue. He's the new president of the United States, leader of the free world. Macron completely blanks him, goes to Angela Merkel, blanks him again, shakes hands with these other two, basically nobodies in comparison to Trump. And only at the end does he actually acknowledge Donald Trump. Do you think, I mean, have you seen the video? Do you think that was deliberate?
I just watched it now while you're playing it. Look, posturing is part of the nonverbal communications that many animals engage in, including humans. So I think you're probably right that there was a bit of signaling that was going on there. But that's to be expected given the reality of the European progressive mind, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, we had the election of Macron just a few weeks ago, and he's already proving to be the little manlet that everybody thought he was. We're coming up on a break again, Gad. We're going to get into this Bill C-16. This is a bill. And by the way, we've got a video coming up, which we'll play after we've finished here with Gad, where they send basically a 300-pound drag queen who looks like a clown into a school. And this individual is teaching 4-year-olds about, quote, gender fluidity. You will not believe this video that we're going to play in the next hour. Absolutely incredible. But after the break, we're going to get into this with Gad Saad, because there is now a bill pending in Canada, which, and we're going to drill into the details, may make it a crime to disrespect somebody's gender pronoun. Absolutely incredible. Going to get into that after the break on the Alex Jones Show. Live breaking news at Infowars.com. Don't go away.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Joe Biggs with Infowars.com, and liberals have finally hit an all-time low. That's right. They are doing drag queen story hour at little schools. I mean, kids that are like 3 and 4. Bringing these little drag queens in, well, actually not little, it's pretty big. It looks like Bozo the Clown. Bringing them around their kids and going, who wants to be a drag queen when they grow up? What kind of brainwashing BS is that? Don't bring that crap around our kids. And you got parents that are going to come up on this video and go, well, I really think this is what I've been looking for my entire life. Really? A giant 300-pound dude with a wig on that looks like Bozo the Clown asking your kids about his hips? Negative, son. That is completely and totally wrong. But hey, what do I know? You're the same kind of people that'll get beat up and killed by ISIS and then go hug a Muslim 10 seconds later and then do another hashtag pray for this, hashtag pray for that, candlelit vigil here, candlelit vigil there, and nothing ever changes. You guys are completely losing the war of humanity. Take a look at this video.
Who wants to be a drag queen when they grow up?
Hell no!
I'm a girl.
No, you ain't.
Hips on the drag queen go swish, 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 swish.
Why are you even talking about your hips in front of these little kids? And why is it that I see a whole bunch of beta male cucks in the background with their cell phones out going, oh, this is so adorable. No, it's not adorable. You guys are out of your freaking mind. There's a grown-ass 300-pound dude dressed up like Bozo the Clown talking to kids about touching his hips.
Drag Queen Story Hour is fantastic because it addresses all of these issues of gender fluidity and self-acceptance.
Really? You're getting self-acceptance lessons from a guy who dresses up like a woman? Are you freaking kidding me? That guy can't even accept the fact that he might have a few bolts loose in his head. Why doesn't he go get a shrink? Why doesn't he go seek medical attention? Instead, this guy can't accept who he is, so he dresses up like something else to mask the deeper problem that's hidden below. That he is just a freaking lunatic. And then also, gender fluidity, negative. There's only two genders.
Do you get it? Everyone thinks that this girl is a boy because she's a little bit of a tomboy.
It's a man, baby!
Those are people who think that gay people are sinful or evil or, you know, bad to begin with. So, you know, we're sort of just starting from such different places that it's kind of irrelevant.
Whoa, so now we have a drag queen giving advice about sexuality at a school with very young, impressionable minds all around them. Sir, ma'am, whatever you are you a doctor? So no, you're not. You're a dude who dresses up like a clown. And you go and tell people stories, for some reason, about sexuality. And for some reason, these parents are stupid enough to let you come in and indoctrinate and brainwash these kids. You have no medical background, you have no medical history, and you have no idea of the side effects of things like that. You don't need to teach those kids those types of things. It is proven with science that some of the most worst things you can do is to have gay sex. Why? STDs, AIDS, all kinds of crap. Now, if you're an adult and you're a consenting adult and you decide you want to go that route, then by all means, whatever. But don't put that in our little children's heads. I don't find this okay. I think this is sick and disturbing that this kind of thing would be allowed into a school like this.
It's great. So much energy. Did you like it? Yeah.
You know, that's what I'm looking for in all of our outings, is to present different ways of being in the world and make that fun and available to my kids.
The hands on the drag queen go jazz, jazz, all through the town.
Man, this is some bullshit! Move this man!
Absolutely revolting. We'll be back to get Gad Saad's take on it after the break. It's the Alex Jones Show live. Don't go away. We're live on the Alex Jones Show talking to Professor Gad Saad. That is G-A-D-S-A-A-D. You can find him on YouTube under that name and Twitter. Also, Gad, you heard the clip. You saw the clip before the break. I mean, when I was in school, I didn't even have sexual thoughts or think about anything like that until the age of, 9, 10, 11. They're teaching 4-year-old kids via this fat, clownish drag queen about gender fluidity. In what crazy world is that a good idea?
Well, I think it comes from the wrong view of the human mind as a empty slate, right? It's called the tabula rasa premise, which basically says we're born with no biological blueprints, no biological imperatives, and it's socialization that then causes us to take the particular trajectories that we do in life. And so if you subscribe to that particular view of the human mind, then, hey, I gotta get the brainwashing started early because the mind is empty. There are no biological imperatives. And so let me start inculcating all this political ideologies, all this activism into these young, gullible children. It's grotesque.
It's the same argument they use for feminists. Some of them want to have sports mixed gender because they claim that, for example, women aren't as good at soccer as men because they didn't grow up playing soccer and it wasn't socialized into them. No, bone mass, stamina, muscle mass, all different. There are two genders. There are biological differences. That's why men in general are better at sports. It's biological. I want to ask you about Bill C-16, though, because you recently testified in front of the Senate in Canada about this. It would, quote, add gender expression or identity as a protected ground to the Canadian Human Rights Act and also to the Criminal Code provisions dealing with hate propaganda, incitement to genocide, and aggravating factors in sentencing. Gad, what exactly is the scope of this? Are we talking about people possibly being arrested or fined for not using the right pronoun?
So I tried to exactly contextualize the difficulties with this bill in terms of how vaguely worded it is by looking at what I do in my life, which is I'm a professor who teaches about evolutionary psychology, about innate sex differences and how these manifest themselves in all sorts of ways. Now, Harvard University's LGBTQ office came out with a pamphlet that basically said, and I'm quoting, that it is transphobic systemic violence, right? This wasn't a metaphor. It is systemic violence to promulgate the notion of fixed binaries and biological essentialism. Fixed binaries is male, female. Biological essentialism is to resort to some biological argument to explain something that deals with human affairs. So by that definition, anything that I teach in my courses would be transphobic systemic violence, right? So for example, if I explain how the process of sexual selection results in, evolved differences between the two sexes, well, someone could come along and say, but I am a non-gendered person. I'm a non-binary person. You didn't include me in your class material, and therefore you're being prejudicial, you're being biased. When I tried to raise all these concerns with the senators, they scoffed and laughed and so on. And then one person actually accused me of being pro-genocide for simply offering possible warning signals regarding how badly phrased the bill was. It was simply astonishing that in the 21st century, a scientist had to go in front of the Canadian Senate to argue that there is such a thing as male and female when it comes to a sexually reproducing species. It's unbelievable.
And we saw the Bill Nye farce a couple of weeks ago where they actually censored part of his original 1996 show, which was basically someone just talking about chromosomes and how there are two biological genders. They actually censored that from the Netflix version. Now he's on Netflix talking about how it's all fluid, calls himself the science guy. Absolutely absurd. And also you talked about this new redefinition. You having a different opinion to them is now not just, oh, you're a Nazi, you're hateful. It's actual violence. Yeah. Gad, I mean, do words just sprout fists and start punching people in the face now? How do words and opinions translate into violence?
I think it's part of what I call collective Munchausen, right? Munchausen is when you feign an illness or an injury so that you can garner sympathy and empathy. Well, this whole victimology ethos that is at the root of all of this social justice warrior activism is ultimately rooted in this collective Munchausen, where I use the following example in my opening remarks at the Canadian Senate, right? René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. The new motto is, I'm a victim, therefore I am, right? I don't exist unless I could, provide a victimology narrative that defines me. And that's the problem, right? Is that these guys operate within a currency of victimhood, and that has to stop.
And some are more victimized than others. Some are more equal than others. If you're a white straight male, you're at the bottom of that league table. Of course, it's the oppression Olympics. Gad, we're coming towards the end of this. Just tell people how they can find you on Twitter and about your YouTube channel.
Thank you for asking. So on Twitter, at Gad, G-A-D-S-A-A-D, please follow me. And then you could go check out my YouTube channel. It's basically a bunch of clips. Sometimes it's just lectures. Other times I'm chatting with people. It's The Sad Truth, S-A-A-D, Truth. Check it out, subscribe, donate. Look forward to interacting with you there.
Okay, and I'll be sure to make an appearance on your channel soon. Gad, thanks for joining us today.
Real pleasure. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Okay, there goes Gad Saad. Extremely insightful chat as per usual.
What could be more triggering to libtards than my face and this slogan? Get your new premium quality "Conservatism is the new counterculture" t-shirt right now at InfoWarsStore.com and let the butthurt commence.